Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to a brand new year, 2021. Lots of new Bible stories to learn today, right? So here's what I'm going to have you do first. Before we go into our story, I want you to picture in your head a bug. But, Mr. Michael, bugs are gross. Bear with me here, kids. We're just doing this as a little take care. Think of a caterpillar, like this one. How does it look to you? Pretty? Ugly? Squishy? Slimy? Maybe. But do you know what happens to a caterpillar later on in its life? It turns into this. You know what that is? It's a chrysalis, right? Some of you might call it a cocoon, but the real word is a chrysalis. When you're in school, you'll learn that one day. And inside that chrysalis, the caterpillar is changing, metamorphosing. What does it become eventually? This. Beautiful. Beautiful butterfly, right? Now, did the caterpillar start that way as a beautiful butterfly? No, took some change, took some time, right? Well, that's in relation to our story today. Our story today, of course, comes from the Bible because we know that's the ultimate source of truth, right? There's a man you might have heard before. His name was Saul. Can you say that with me, boys and girls? Saul. There you go. I'm glad you put the L at the end of the word instead of the T, so you're saying Saul and not salt. Very good. Keep up the good work in school. Now, Saul, he was an interesting man. If I were to put it in a good way, so that you're not too worried about it, he didn't like believers in God. He didn't think that people who believed in God were good people. So you know what he decided to do? After thinking about it, going back and forth. Should I do this? Should I not do it? Looks like, little bad guy appeared on his shoulder, and that's what he decided to do. He decided to go hurt the Christians. And you know what he did? He helped get them beaten. He got them thrown in jail. He helped them get killed. He did all these bad things to God's people. But God was not done with Saul. And you might be like, Mr. Michael, how could God use a man that didn't like Christians? Well, he can, boys and girls. And here's how he did it. The Bible tells us that Saul, walking down the road, thinking about who he was going to hurt next, when all of a sudden, a big, blinding light came from heaven and caused him to not be able to see anymore. He even dropped to the ground. And he was probably scared by this blinding light. But I'll bet you know who was providing that light, right? Of course, it was the light of God. And Paul was probably going like this, trying to see. And the Bible tells us a voice came from heaven, and it was like, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Obviously, that was the voice of God, asking Saul pretty much, why are you hurting me? Why are you hurting my people? But Saul really didn't have an answer at the time. He was so surprised that God would come to him like that. He just lay there for a little bit. But do you think God just let him stay there like that on the road blind? No. A few towns over, there was a good man who believed in God named Ananias. That's a little bit hard to pronounce, but let's try it. Ananias. There you go, boys and girls. Good. And the Bible tells us that God spoke to this good man, Ananias, and he said, Ananias, go down the street. There's a man down there who's blind and can't see. You're going to help him. Ananias was a little nervous at first because he knew of Saul and all the bad things that Saul would do. But God reassured him that he would not be hurt and that good things were going to come out of it. So what do you think, boys and girls? Ananias too, probably going back and forth. Do I do this? Do I not do it? And he chose the little good guy. Yes, so there he goes. Ananias went, and he found Saul in the road, and he helped him up. Brought him back to his house. He took care of him. But it doesn't end there. What happened was Saul, this mean man who hurt and killed believers in God, had a big change of heart. As a matter of fact, he decided that he was no longer going to hurt Christians, but after experiencing the light of God, he decided to help Christians and help spread the word of God all throughout the world. And with that change of heart came a change of name. Do any of you boys and girls know what his name became? Ah, well, if you said it, I hope you were right. His name was changed to Paul. Say that with me, boys and girls. Paul. And what's that? Oh, yes, of course, Saul and Paul do rhyme. You're doing great in school. Keep up the good work. Anyways, back on point. His name became Paul, and he became one of the most well-known authors of the books in the Bible in the New Testament. If you have questions about that, ask your mom and dad about it. I'm sure they can help guide you. So Paul became a very well-known helper of Christians and a servant of God. Why? Because he changed after the experience, just like the butterfly. People can change. If a small caterpillar can become a beautiful butterfly, then a person who was struggling and overcome by hatred can change as well, as we saw by Saul becoming Paul. So if you're ever worried about that, boys and girls, or you're feeling just a little dread in your heart, talk to somebody or pray about it, because God can change anyone.